Good morning. Welcome to day 20 of Bible in a Year. We're going through the Bible from Genesis to Revelation in 365 days. We're reading the greatest love story ever told between God and his people. This time we are in the period of the patriarchs. We are following the Adventure Timeline by Jeff Cavins. We're reading the New International Version translation, and today we're going to be going through Genesis 38, the story of Judah and Tamar, where we're going to be talking about Judah, who's the fourth son of Leah. Remember, this is the also the son of Israel. And in this story we see that he has three sons, Onan, and Shelah. And he eventually marries in the story his oldest son, off to Tamar. He's a wicked man, it says, and so God smites him. And then again, she gets married on to Onan, and he does evil because he doesn't want to conceive with her. And God smites him. And then, so she's left with no husband. Because the youngest one, Shelah, is not old enough to take her as a wife, and so she eventually takes it into her own hands to sleep with Judah, which is kind of weird. Well, one, because he's married to the mother of these three. She dies. The mother of Onan and Shelah dies, and So anyways, Tamar figures it's time for her to dress up as a prostitute and sleep with him. So, interesting story. Kind of weird. And we also read Job 29 to 30. Job continues his discourse towards Bildad the Shuhite. And then lastly, we read Proverbs 3, 28 to 32, where we talk about some of the things not to do, like not to pay people late or plot harm or false witness against another. Anyway, so let's get into it. Genesis 38. At this time, Judah left his brother and went down to stay with a man of Adullam named Hirah. There Judah met the daughter of a Canaanite man named Shua. He married her and lay with her. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son, who was named She conceived again and gave birth to a son and named him Onan. She gave birth to still another son and named him Shelah. It was at Kezib that she gave birth to him. Judah got a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the Lord's sight. So the Lord put him to death. And Judah said to Onan, "Lie with your brother's wife, and fulfill your duty to her as a brother-in-law to produce offspring for your brother." But Onan knew that the offspring would not be his. So whenever he lay with his brother's wife, he spilled his semen on the ground to keep from producing offspring for his brother. What he did was wicked in the Lord's sight, so he put him to death also. Judah then said to his daughter-in-law Tamar, "Live as a widow in your father's house until my son Shelah grows up." For he thought, he may die too, just like his brothers. So Tamar went to live in her father's house. After a long time, Judah's wife, the daughter of Shua, died. When Judah had recovered from his grief, he went up to Timnah, to the man who was shearing his sheep, and his friend Hirah, the Dulamite, went with him. When Tamar was told, "Your father-in-law is on his way to Timnah to shear his sheep," she took off her widow's clothes, covered herself with a veil to disguise herself, and then sat down at the entrance of Enaim, which is on the road to Timnah. When she saw that, though Shelah had now grown up, she had not been given to him as his wife. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a prostitute, for she was covering her face. Not realizing that she was a daughter-in-law, he went over to her by the roadside and said, "Come now, let me sleep with you." "And what will you give me to sleep with you?" she asked. "I'll send you a young goat from my flock," he said. "Will you give me something as a pledge until you send it?" she asked. He said, "What pledge should I give you?" "Your seal and its cord, and the staff in your hand," she answered. So he gave them to her and slept with her, and she became pregnant by him. After she left, she took off her veil and put on her widow's clothes again. Meanwhile, Judah sent the young goat by his friend the Adullamite in order to get his pledge back from the woman. But he did not find her. He asked the men who lived there, "Where is the shrine prostitute who is beside the road at Enaim?" "There hasn't been any shrine prostitutes here," they said. So he went back to Judah and said, "I didn't find her. Besides, the men who lived there said, 'There hasn't been any shrine prostitutes here.'" And Judah said, "Let her keep what she has, or we will become a laughingstock. After all, I did send her this young goat, but you didn't find her." After 3 months later, Judah was told, "Your daughter-in-law Tamar is guilty of prostitution. As a result, she is now pregnant." Judah said, "Bring her out and have her burned to death." As she was being brought out, she sent a message to her father-in-law. "I am pregnant by the man who owns these," she said. And she added, "See if you recognize those seal and cord and staff. These are." Judah recognized them and said, "She is more righteous than I, since I wouldn't give her to my son Shelah." And he did not sleep with her again. When the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. As she was giving birth, one of them put out his hand. So the midwife took a scarlet thread and tied it on his wrist and said, "This one came out first." But when he drew back his hand, his brother came out. And she said, "So this is how you have broken out." And he was named Perez. Then his brother, who had the scarlet thread on his wrist, came out, and he was given the name Zerah. Our next reading comes from Job 29 to 30. Chapter 29. Job continued his discourse. "How I long for the months gone by, for the day when God watches over me, when his lamp shone upon my head, and by his light I walk through darkness. Oh, for the days when I was in my prime, when God's intimate friendship blessed my house, when the Almighty was still with me, and my children were around me, when my path was drenched with cream, and the rock poured out from me streams of olive oil. When I went to the gate of the city, and took my seat in the public square, the young men saw me and stepped aside, and the old men rose to their feet. The chief men refrained from speaking and covered their mouths with their hands. The voices of the nobles were hushed, and their tongues stuck to the roof of their mouth. Whoever heard me spoke well of me, and those who saw me commended me, because I rescued the poor who cried for help, and the fatherless who had none to assist him. The man who was dying blessed me. I made the widow's heart sing. I put on righteousness as my clothing. Justice was my robe and my turban. I was eyes to the blind and feet to the lame. I was a father to the needy. I took up the case of the stranger. I broke the fangs of the wicked and snatched the victims from their teeth. I thought, I will die in my own house. My days are numerous as the grain of sand. My roots will reach to the water, and the dew will lie all night on my branches. My glory will remain fresh in me, the bow ever new in my hand. Men listened to me expectantly, waiting in silence for my counsel. After I had spoken, they spoke no more. My words fell gently on their ears. They waited for me as for showers, and drank in my words as a spring rain. When I smiled at them, they scarcely believed it. A light in my face was precious to them. I chose the way for them and sat as their chief. I dwelt as a king amongst their troops. I was like one who comforts mourners. Chapter 30. But now they mock me, men younger than I, whose father I would have disdained to put with my sheepdogs. Of what use was the strength of their hands to me, since their vigor had gone from them? Haggard from want and hunger, they roamed the parched lands. In desolate wastelands at night, in the brush they gathered salt herbs, and their food was the root of the broom tree. They were banished from their fellow men, shouted at as if they were thieves. They were forced to live in the dry stream beds, amongst the rocks and in the holes in the ground. They brayed amongst the bushes and huddled in the undergrowth. A base and nameless brood. They were driven out to the land, and now their sons mock me in song. I become a byword amongst them. They detest me and keep their distance. They do not hesitate to spit in my face. Now that God has unstrung my bow and afflicted me, they throw off resistance in my presence. On my right the tribe attacks. They lay snares for my feet. They build their siege ramps against me. They break up my road. They succeed in destroying me without anyone helping them. They advance as through a gasping breach. Amid the ruins they come rolling in. Terror overwhelms me. My dignity is driven away, as by the wind. My safety vanishes like a cloud. And now my life ebbs away. Days of suffering grip me. Night pierces my bones, my gnawing pains never rest. In his great power, God becomes like clothing to me. He binds me like the neck of my garment. He throws me into the mud, and I am reduced to dust and ashes. I cry out to you, O God, but you do not answer me. I stand up, but you merely look at me. You turn on me ruthlessly. With the might of your hand you attack me. You snatch me up and drive me before the wind. You toss me about in the storm. I know you will bring me down to death, to the place appointed for all the living. Surely no one lays a hand on a broken man when he cries for help in his distress. Have I not wept for those in trouble? Has not my soul grieved for the poor? Yet when I hoped for good, evil came. When I looked for light, then came darkness. The churning inside me never stops. Days of suffering confront me. I go about blackened, but not by the sun. I stand up in the assembly and cry for help. I have become a brother of the jackals, a companion of owls. My skin grows black and peels. My body burns with fever. My harp is tuned to mourning, and my flute to the sound of wailing. Our final reading is from Proverbs chapter 3, verses 28 to 32. Do not say to your neighbor, "Come back later, I'll give it tomorrow," when you now have it with you. Don't plot harm against your neighbor, who lives trustfully near you. Do not accuse a man for no reason when he has done you no harm. Do not envy a violent man or choose any of his ways, for the Lord detests a perverse man, but takes the upright in his confidence. Well, some more words of wisdom. Yeah, we shouldn't envy violent people or cause anyone to do harm when they're it's like it says, don't stop a man while he's treading out the grapes or the wheat, but do good when you have the opportunity and chance to. We hear this passage 29 to 30 with Job. Again, it's we hear of the derision that Job goes through and the disdain that he feels he's been put under, and yeah, I mean, Job really speaks the story of duress and distance that some people feel with God and feel with their fellow man when they fall into hard times and times of need, and but you know, the great thing is that, like the Psalms, God's got big enough shoulders to be able to hear our complaints against him, our weeping, our sorrows, and he never stops listening to us. He always hears our prayers and he answers them. And you'll see this as we go through Job. And lastly, we go over the story in Genesis about Judah and Tamar. Such a strange story. Well, there's a myriad of problems, right? First, we see Judah marries this Canaanite woman, which, right? I mean, God specifically says, "Do not marry the people of Canaan because it will bring you problems." And what happens right away with Judah? He marries this girl, and it doesn't say there's anything wrong with her, but in other ways, it does insinuate that, since it shows that the children, their offspring, are evil. Like he doesn't even want to give his third son to Tamar because he doesn't want her to have to go through this hardship, and so he just ends up not marrying her off to him. But that causes a myriad of problems also, because she feels like she's being left out in the cold, and so she takes it into her own hands to sleep with him after his wife dies. And so it's such an awkward story, but yet Judah says to her that she is righteous because she wants to make sure that she does her due diligence as wanting to have a child through that line of, and so he sees her as righteous, and instead of stoning her, he actually exalts her. So it's even though awkward story, it shows that Judah is the wrongs are righted in this story, and we often see that, even though in our own dysfunctional lives, things just seem to go from bad to worse and couldn't get any better, but sometimes they do get better. Like in this story, I mean, she was trying to be faithful to her family line, and by doing this, she's called righteous. And actually, she is the mother of, if we read in Matthew and Luke, we see in the genealogies that they're a very pertinent role in the line of from Abraham to Christ. And so thanks be to God for showing that even within this dysfunctionalness, that God still brings about his glory. So may you ever be blessed with God's glory. May you have a wonderful day. Just ask that you might pray for me, and as I pray for you, that you might gain in knowledge and wisdom and the fear of the Lord. Have an excellent day. God bless.